Did you know Stephen King hates the film adaptation of The Shining?
Did you like Kubrick's film of The Shining?
No. Cold.
The movie was directed by Stanley Kubrick and received so much praise. The public loves it. The film itself is regarded as a horror classic. Yet despite all the film's success, Stephen King hates it. And I can sort of see why. The Shining is considered his most famous and popular book, and considering all the changes the movie made to the story, I can understand why he dislikes the movie so much. For one, there was the way Wendy's character was portrayed on screen, and the mental and psychological abuse Shelley Duvall endured at the hands of Stanley Kubrick. And because of how she was treated, it showed through her acting. And because of this, Wendy's character was so different from the way Stephen King wrote her to be, and Stephen King hated these changes.
She's basically just there to scream and be stupid. And that's not the woman that I wrote about.
So now, not only did the story he worked so hard on, the story that propelled his career to new levels, change in a way that went against his original vision, but he has to go on living with the knowledge that the thing that changed his life for the better made someone else's worse. I read the book too once upon a time, and in my opinion, I liked the book better for reasons I'll explain later. But right now, we're here to discuss the movie. Hello, my name is Sushana, and welcome to my channel at sushisreads, where I discuss movies, short films, TV shows, and anything I find interesting. And today, we're discussing The Shining, a story based off the famous Stephen King novel of the same name. It follows a man named Jack who takes a job as winter caretaker at the illustrious Overlook Hotel. So he moves his wife Wendy and their son Danny out into the mountains with him. But there's something dark about the Overlook Hotel. During the winter, the place offers absolute seclusion because of the intensely harsh storms, which may lead some to develop cabin fever. That's why the last caretaker slaughtered his entire family in the hotel. But that's just one of the many deaths that occurred there. As the winter gets worse, Jack loses grip on his sanity. Now his son and wife must defend themselves against both the spirits that inhabit the hotel and the ones infiltrating Jack's mind. So the story starts off with Jack, who's on his way to a job interview at the Overlook Hotel to become the winter caretaker. This position is hard to fill because not many people can handle being trapped in seclusion for 5 months straight. And I think this really shows the difference in times, because as long as there's an internet connection, 5 months of seclusion in a resort seems kind of fantastic to me. However, because of the intense snowstorms that frequent the area during the winter season, the hotel remains vacant, with the exception being the winter caretaker, whose job is to keep the boiler or generator running so that the hotel can open in the following season. The movie doesn't tell you this, but in the book it explains that Jack lost his job as a school teacher after showing up to work drunk and physically assaulting a student. And because he has a wife and son to take care of, he's kind of desperate for an opportunity. Besides, he's working on a novel, and 5 months of alone time seems like the opportunity he needs to make his author dreams into a reality. With no other competition, Jack is offered the job, but first, the hotel manager feels like it's only right to warn him. First, there's a mental struggle. 5 months of seclusion makes one susceptible to cabin fever. But he also tells them about what happened to the old caretaker. Turns out, the old caretaker couldn't handle the isolation and ended up slaughtering his entire family with an axe before shooting himself through the mouth with a shotgun. Jack's like, yikes, sucks to suck, I guess, and takes the job anyway. And it's in this conversation where I first noticed that Jack does not give a fuck about his family. Because the hotel manager isn't flat out saying like, hey man, I don't think you should take this job, but he's very clearly hinting that this isn't a good idea and it won't be good for him and his family to be up there. He doesn't want the past to repeat itself. Jack's like, honestly, respectfully, fuck my family, like I need this job. Back at home, Jack's wife Wendy and their son Danny are eating breakfast around the table while watching Looney Tunes, and they're talking about Jack's potential new job opportunity. Wendy seems thrilled for an escape from their old life. Her son Danny doesn't seem to be fazed by the move because he doesn't have any friends anyway, so moving to the Colorado Rockies is no big deal, but his imaginary friend Tony feels different. Now, Wendy's the sort of mom who doesn't scold her kid for having an imaginary friend. She goes along with it. She may not believe Tony is real and that it's just Danny's internalized thoughts showcasing themselves through Tony, but she still addresses him and speaks to him as if he actually existed. And she tells both Tony and Danny it's gonna be fun, but Tony is not convinced. What she doesn't know is that Tony is real. He's just a spirit and her son can talk to him. She doesn't know her son has these abilities. She just thinks like he's having an imaginary friend, but Tony is a spirit that talks to Danny, shows him visions of the future. He has these supernatural abilities that no one else knows he has. After breakfast, Tony and Danny decide to have a private little chat in the bathroom. The topic being why Tony is so against moving to the Overlook. And that's when Tony shows Danny 3 visions of his future at the hotel. The first is a hallway filled with waves of blood. The second are a set of creepy twins wearing blue dresses holding hands, and the third is Danny screaming. Now, Danny has no idea what these visions mean, but he can't deny that what he saw terrified him. So when Tony tells Danny that Jack got the job and is going to be calling Wendy soon to relay the news, it's already too late to do anything. He has no choice but to suck it up and go live his new life, despite his terror. So they head to the Overlook, and while Jack speaks to the hotel manager, Wendy and Danny are given a tour by the cook, Mr. Halloran, and he's showing them around the enormous hotel kitchen, telling them what food they have in stock, where everything is, and it's here while giving them a tour where Halloran calls Danny Doc, a nickname only used by his parents. And yeah, it's cute, sure, but Wendy's positive she hadn't called Danny Doc, so how did Mr. Halloran know that was his nickname? Halloran laughs it off, claiming Danny looks like a doctor, but Danny knows something's up. He can feel it. It's like he gets a connection that he can't explain. So while Danny is watching Halloran talk to his mom, something peculiar happens. He starts hearing Halloran's voice in his head, but the words he's saying to his mom aren't the same ones coming out of his mouth right now. And it's like he's having two conversations at once. And that's when he realizes that Halloran is actually speaking to him through his mind. He's not going crazy. Halloran is actually speaking with him through his mind, revealing that they share the same supernatural abilities, and these abilities are called the Shining. When Jack and the hotel manager meet back up with the rest of the family, the hotel manager asks Halloran to watch Danny so that he could talk to Jack and Wendy alone. And now that Halloran and Danny are alone, they're able to speak freely about their powers. Halloran explains that just like Danny, he's had his abilities since he was a kid, and that he and his grandma used to have entire conversations with each other through their minds. Even though he doesn't say it, the story hints that this ability is most likely hereditary. He also tells him that there are others out there with the shine, but they just don't know it. They think it's like a deep, accurate intuition. Despite Tony warning Danny never to tell anyone about their little spiritual connection, Danny's comfortable telling Halloran anyway, which is completely understandable because this is the first person Danny's ever met with the same abilities as him. So of course he wants to know more. So when he asks Halloran if the hotel is bad, Halloran tells him the truth. A lot of things happened at the Overlook, some things not so good, but nothing he doesn't think Danny and his family should be worried about. But this inquisitiveness sparks something in Halloran. He wonders, does Danny know something? Had he seen something to make him worry? And because Danny is a kid and the visions he had no context, Danny doesn't know what he saw, so he says he doesn't know anything. But he is curious about one thing, room 237. He'd been shown the door in a vision and he wants to know why. What's in there? Why is it so important? Why had Tony shown him this? And even though Halloran insists that there's nothing in that specific room, he says Danny has no business going in there. He also tells Danny not to be scared of these visions. What he's seeing isn't real and more like pictures in a book. It's why, despite his worry, Halloran is sure that they'll be safe and tells Danny to call him telepathically if he ever needs him. In the meantime, Wendy and Jack are shown the 2-bedroom suite they'll be living in for the next 5 months. By midnight, everyone except Jack, Wendy, and Danny take their leave. A month passes, and I realize Jack doesn't really spend much time with his family. Even when Wendy asks for him to take her on a walk, he shuts her down, claiming it's best if he got some reading in first. This is one of the first instances we see where Jack's distancing himself from the rest of his family. And because he turned her down, Wendy and Danny explore the hotel together, including the ginormous maze outside. But things get weird when Danny is playing in one of the hotel's many rooms and turns around to see the 2 twins with blue dresses from his vision standing there staring at him. And it's not long before they show themselves again. This time, they do more than just stand there. They show Danny what their father did to them. He sees their mutilated bodies laying in the hallway covered in blood. They ask him if he'd like to play with them forever and ever and ever. He's understandably terrified. This is what Tony had tried to warn him about earlier, but because it's already too late, he's already in the hotel and there's nowhere else for him to go, Tony tries to calm him by reminding him of what Halloran said to him. The visions aren't real, they're like pictures in a book, remember? But this doesn't really do much because Danny knows what he saw, and what he saw was evil. As time passes, the storm rages outside, completely blanketing the place in snow. The roads are completely blocked, and yeah, there's a snow cat in the garage which can drive them through the snow, but there's very little use for it if you can't even see the road in front of you. Seeing in that tundra is going to be a problem. There's at least 10 inches of snow. Traveling through the Rockies at this time is said to be almost impossible. People are dying in the cold. It's just an absolute mess. Another problem, the phone lines are down and the only way to call for help is through the emergency radio. While Danny is playing in the hallway, a ball rolls over to him. He follows its path, thinking it's his mom trying to play. Instead, he's led to the infamous room 237, the very room Halloran told him he had no business being in. But curiosity gets the better of him when he sees that the door is open. Thinking his mom had been the one to open the door, Danny goes inside to find her. But Wendy isn't in the room. She's actually doing Jack's job and checking on the boiler. But that's interrupted when she hears Jack screaming from the lobby. He's sobbing when she finds him. Why? Because he had a nightmare where he chopped Wendy and Danny up into little pieces, just as the previous winter caretaker has done to his family. And things only get worse when Danny walks in and she sees bruises around his neck. Immediately, Wendy thinks Jack is the culprit because this isn't the first time Jack would have put his hands on his son. 3 years ago, Jack broke Danny's arm in a drunken rage. So when Danny showed up with hand marks around his neck, Wendy thinks that the past is repeating itself, and now that they're trapped in a hotel for the winter, she's terrified that maybe Jack will slip back into his old ways, and this time they won't be able to run away. Wendy's accusations piss Jack off so much that he needs to go for a walk to calm himself down. Eventually, he finds himself in the ballroom where, lo and behold, a bartender named Lloyd is already waiting for him. Keep in mind, there's nobody except them in the hotel. And at first I thought, okay, this is just one of the hotel's many spirits, but I read somewhere that Lloyd is actually Jack's version of an imaginary friend in the same way Tony is to Danny. The difference being that Tony warns Danny about possible threats and Lloyd lets Jack give in to his own desires. He doesn't warn Jack about what's to come and instead encourages him. And I wonder if this is because of the hotel's influence in Lloyd or if it's just how the relationship is. It would definitely explain Jack's past behavior or why Jack succumbed to drinking so much. Maybe the spirits that latch onto Jack because of his shine are evil whereas Danny's aren't. And because of this, it's been slowly wreaking havoc on his life. It's why despite Jack knowing he's not supposed to drink because he becomes an angry and violent person when he's under the influence, Lloyd doesn't stop him from ordering his poison of choice, a glass of whiskey. Now that he's loosened up, he confides in Lloyd. Yes, he'd hurt Danny one time 3 years ago, but it was an accident and now his bitch wife won't ever let him forget it.
That bitch. As long as I live, she'll never let me forget what happened.
And it's here when Wendy runs into the room clutching a baseball bat in terror. Apparently, there's a crazy woman in the hotel who tried to strangle Danny. Even though Jack thinks she's out of her mind, he asks her what room it is so he can go and check it out for himself. And it's here where I noticed Jack's indifference to all the supernatural abilities. At first, I thought maybe he's just desperate for a job. Yes, the hotel manager had told him some story about the hotel being on top of a burial ground, but I thought, okay, maybe Jack doesn't believe in spirits or hauntings. But then, the bartender scene showed me differently. I wondered if the movie was trying to tell us that Jack knows he has the shining, but it only really presents itself when he's drunk. And because it only happens when he's intoxicated, and because it seems like his only power is seeing spirits, maybe he believes that these spirits are more like alcohol-induced dreams rather than psychic abilities. Jack doesn't know there's something evil about the Overlook Hotel. Danny does though. It's why he telepathically contacts Halloran to tell him that they're in trouble. So Halloran does what any good person would do, and he tries calling the hotel only to find that the phone lines are down. Unable to shake the bad feeling he has, he makes a decision to go to the hotel and check things out for himself. For good measure, he calls the emergency station and he asks them to check up on the family in the Overlook Hotel. Back in the Overlook, Jack heads to room 237, but what he finds at first isn't so scary. There in the tub is a naked woman. Jack, who's still married, doesn't think, what the hell is this random lady doing in the hotel? Instead, he thinks, wait a minute, I should try to fuck her. So instead of pushing her away, he wraps his arms around her and kisses her. But when he looks in the mirror, he finds that the woman had aged decades in seconds. Not only that, but her skin is rotting and decaying as if she's a walking corpse. Jack runs from the room, locking the door behind him, and he goes to find Wendy. And he lies about what he saw. He says there was nothing in there and that Danny must have made those bruises on his neck himself. Worried for Danny's sanity, Wendy suggests that she take him and leave the Overlook, but Jack doesn't take this too well. To him, it seems like Wendy is getting in the way of his accomplishments, like she's trying to make a problem out of nothing. First, she accuses him of harming their son, and now she's fucking up his one chance at a good job. Remember, Jack is struggling with this feelings of inadequacy, and because he's not the sort of person to take accountability for his actions, he constantly uses his wife as a scapegoat. He thinks she's once again trying to ruin his chances of doing better for himself. It's why he snaps at her and then storms off in a rage. And when he hears music coming from the ballroom, he follows it. Even though they're supposed to be alone in the hotel, the ballroom is packed with formally dressed guests. Of course, Jack's first stop is the bar where he orders a whiskey, and before he goes out and mingles with the rest of the guests, he bumps into a server who spills his entire tray of drinks on him. Together, they head to the washroom, and as the server begins wiping the mess from Jack's jacket, Jack notices something peculiar about him. He's certain he's seen this man before. In fact, he knows exactly where he's seen him. And when the server confirms his name is Grady, Jack's suspicions are confirmed. This man is Grady, the caretaker caretaker who was at the Overlook before Jack, the very same man who slaughtered his family and shot himself in the face. Even though Grady denies that he's the man Jack's talking about, they both know the truth. It's him alright, but there's something off. It's like they have an understanding, like they share the same internalized rage. And it's almost like Grady knows exactly what Jack wants to hear. It's why he does things like call Jack special and reminds him that he is the caretaker. He is the one responsible for the hotel. This large building can only run because of him, and to me, this is like him assuring Jack of the power of his position. He is in control of the structure and everything in it, and through this, it's like he's assuring Jack that he has the power to take control of everything around him. And this idea of losing power, of losing control of his life, is something Jack had been struggling with throughout the entire film. This conversation with Grady is like the complete opposite of the one he had with Wendy. And Jack might not know this on a conscious level, but subconsciously, he understands that Grady is telling him everything his wife hasn't. This conversation does two things. It deepens his connection with Grady, allowing the evil spirit to infiltrate his brain more than it already has, and it also deepens the resentment he has towards his wife. That's when Grady informs Jack that Danny is up to no good. In fact, he's going to do the worst thing imaginable.
Did you know, Mr. Torrance, that your son is attempting to bring an outside party into this situation?
Jack sees the issue, but he wonders how it's even possible. How can Danny bring someone to the Overlook when he doesn't even know how to use the radio to call for help? As a spirit, Grady can feel people with the shine. In the book, it explains that the hotel itself, because it's infested with spirits, can feel Danny's power. The hotel is explained as almost a spiritual entity that hasn't eaten since Grady's situation in the 70s. It's hungry and it wants to consume Danny so it can get stronger, so it can consume his abilities and possess more people. As one of the spirits, this means if the hotel gets Danny, then Grady eats too. It's why he tells Jack about Danny's special talent. Jack of course blames Wendy for Danny's misbehavior. To further manipulate a very vulnerable and drunk Jack, Grady makes him question the grip he has on his family. Jack feels like he's powerless. He doesn't have a job, his world is crumbling around him, he has writer's block, and now it's like he has no power in his own household. His position as a man is being called into question. So Grady gives him a piece of advice. His daughters didn't like the Overlook either. In fact, one of them tried to burn it down. It's why he had to correct them. And when his wife tried to stop him, he corrected her too. And now he thinks Jack should do the same. So when Jack heads out into the hotel, the first thing he does is go to the emergency radio and takes the battery, making sure no calls can be made in or out of the hotel. At this point, Jack's been gone for so long, Wendy begins to worry. Thinking he's working on his novel, she goes to the lobby to find him. And for once, he isn't there, but his typewriter is. And she's curious, so she takes a look at his work. She expects to find a novel, a story of some kind. What she doesn't expect to find is the same sentence written over and over again across hundreds of pieces of paper. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. Written across every page. And that's when the realization that her husband has gone insane hits her. It takes a toll on her. She's so overwhelmed that she doesn't even know Jack is standing right behind her, watching her figure him out. That's until he asks her what she's doing. And that's when she notices the crazed look in his eyes. Despite her trying to play it off, she's clutching that bat from earlier for dear life. And I'm sitting here like, girl, you need to mollywop his ass. But she doesn't. She backs up the stairs slowly, and he's going after her, blaming her for everything. She wants to take his kid away from him. She wants them to leave the hotel. She wants to fuck up his job, thus ruining the only job he can get. Blah, 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 blah. He's just getting so mad. This, coupled with the alcohol, the untreated anger issues, and the manipulative spirits infiltrating his mind, have made Jack snap. The spirits have fully taken over, and now he's possessed. So when he says he's gonna bash her head in, she panics, hitting him in the head with the bat. And after he rolls down the stairs unconscious, she drags his body into the kitchen and locks him in the freezer. Unbeknownst to them, Danny is having more visions. He sees the hallway filled with waves of blood again, but now he's seeing a new one. The word red rum written in red ink on a door. Wendy grabs the knife from the kitchen while Jack bangs on the door, begging to be let out of the freezer. But Wendy isn't buying it. Her plan is to phone for help on the radio and take the snowcat out to the nearest doctor for help. Unfortunately for her, Jack had already fucked both of those up before he got to her, so now she's shit out of luck. There's no way out of the hotel. All the roads are blocked, and now she can't even call for help. To make matters worse, Grady found Jack in the freezer and let him out, instructs Jack that now he must deal with his wife in the harshest way possible. Somehow, Wendy feels safe enough to sleep that night. She thinks her husband is safe locked in the freezer. She's completely unaware that her son is walking around in a trance, chanting the word red rum over and over again while holding the knife she took from the kitchen. Danny takes her red lipstick, writes red rum on the door while screaming it out loud, and it wakes her up. And when she looks in the mirror, she sees that in the reflection, red rum is actually the word murder backwards. And as if on cue, she hears banging from the front door. It's Jack, and he's trying to break it down using Grady's trusty axe. Wendy locks her and Danny in the bathroom as Jack makes his way inside. Unable to fit through the washroom window, she's forced to do what any good mother would do and save her kid instead. So she slides Danny through the window and stays back to fight off her possessed husband. He breaks down the door, but the moment he puts his hand through the hole to unlock it, she slices his hand. The chaos silences when they hear Halloran riding in on a snowcat onto the premises before he begins searching the hotel for Danny. Unfortunately, the moment Jack sees Halloran, catapults an axe right through his chest, killing him. And because of their psychic connection, Danny is having visions of the entire thing, so he sees Halloran's death. So when he sees the attack, Danny, who'd gone back inside the hotel to hide in one of the kitchen cupboards, he screams, alerting his father to his location. Desperate to get away, Danny runs outside into the snowstorm and into the maze with his dad hot on his trail. Wendy, on the other hand, is searching the hotel for her son. But Jack isn't the only one pissed. All the angry and vengeful spirits inside of the hotel are as well. And this is when they decide to show themselves to Wendy. So Wendy's freaking out. She's wondering, why is there a man in a bear suit giving sloppy toppy to a man in a tuxedo? She's wondering what the fuck Grady is doing in the middle of the hallway with blood all over his body. She may not know the extent of what's going on, but she does know she has to get the hell out of the hotel. As she's heading outside to search for her son, Danny is in the maze wondering how his dad is following him even though he's so far ahead of him. And it doesn't take long for him to realize that he's unknowingly showing his dad where to go because of the footprints in the snow. And Danny's a pretty smart kid, so he stops mid-run and steps backwards into the footprints he already created until he's able to jump into a nearby bush and hide. Eventually, Jack makes it to Danny's hiding spot, and because the footprints cut off right there, he's left aimlessly stumbling through the maze. And Danny makes it out at the same time that his mom makes it out of the hotel, and together they hop in the snowcat Halloran came in with and they escape. By the next morning, Jack has frozen to death in the maze. The movie ends with that picture Jack had seen earlier of a party at the Overlook Hotel, and even though the photo says it was taken in 1920, Jack is in the center of the photo smiling up at us, showing that the hotel has completely consumed him and his soul and his spirit. Despite all the possession and evil spirits, this story is about loss of control, loss of self. Throughout the film, Jack struggled with this idea of control. There was the loss of control he had as the head of his family, leading to him questioning his position as the man of the household. There was the loss of control he had over his job after getting fired, loss of control over his emotions, leading to intense anger outbursts and violence that his own family had to endure. First, through him breaking Danny's arm in the past, and then the murderous possessed rampage that followed later on. In the end, it all comes full circle with the ultimate loss of self when Jack loses control of his mind, and then later he loses his own life and his soul, as we see through the picture. This is also a film about manipulation. Throughout the movie, Jack is constantly being manipulated by the spirits in the Overlook Hotel, and they use his struggle with control against him. They get him to question himself, to question his power within his family dynamic, and it works because they know it's his greatest fear. Although Jack did horrible things, he did want to do good. He wanted to take care of his family. He wanted to start new. He wanted to be a better example to his kid, but he was dealing with a lot of invisible threats. And one thing the movie doesn't flat out state, but it hints at, is that Jack had the shine as well, which is where Danny probably got his abilities from. However, unlike Danny, Jack didn't know he had it. I don't think he did. And because of this, the spirits in the hotel were able to easily manipulate him. Like Halloran explains in the movie, most people don't know they have it, and they just think it's some sort of intuition. Because Jack didn't have control of his abilities, the spirits could infiltrate his mind and manipulate his thoughts. Combined with the cabin fever brought on by intense isolation and the alcohol, they were able to plant a seed of paranoia and watch it bloom. Eventually, these evil spirits took over Jack's mind so they could use him to fulfill their own desires. Hence why they used him to get to Danny. What the movie doesn't tell you is that the hotel wanted Danny. They could feel the strength of his abilities, and in order for the hotel to become stronger, it wanted to absorb Danny and his powers. And because Jack was the weakest link, they used him to do it. I also wanted to talk about the significance of the maze and how it can represent Jack's declining mental state. It's a structure built in the grounds of the Overlook Hotel, a structure designed to act like a puzzle where you must find your way out. In the end, Jack is left aimlessly walking around until he ends up freezing to death by the next morning. Jack isn't just stuck in the physical maze, but he's stuck in a mental one as well. As the spirits infiltrate his mind, it's like the real Jack is gone. He may exist somewhere deep inside, but he doesn't know his way out. Before he dies, Jack can't even speak. By this point, it's like he's also void of soul since the spirits have taken over. I also think it's interesting how the movie showed how every decision Jack made led to his downfall. He ignored the hotel manager's warnings in the beginning and put him and his family in harm's way by going to the Overlook. He didn't go for that walk with Wendy in the beginning, and she ended up walking through the maze with Danny. And because Jack refused earlier, he didn't know his way out of the maze in the end, and Danny did. He's also never seen leaving the hotel and going outside, leading to the development of his cabin fever, which slowly drove him insane. He wrote, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." However, Jack avoided every opportunity he had to play. He didn't hang out with his family, turned down every opportunity he had to hang out with them, and further secluded himself. Now onto my thoughts. I wish the film portrayed Wendy in a similar light as the book had. I found that in the movie they made her a floundering, screaming, scared damsel, and I wish she was portrayed with a bit more strength. But this is understandable when you learn about the abuse Shelley Duvall, who played Wendy, suffered with while going through this film. I read some articles that said she was treated horribly on set. Not only was she exhausted because it took 500 days to film the fucking movie, and there were some scenes she had to film over 100 times, but Stanley Kubrick, the director of The Shining, treated her like shit.
He can do some pretty cruel things.
He never offered her praise, only complaints. He made the staff shun her, he cut a lot of her lines, she was kept in isolation, and he did all this so he could put her in the mind frame of the Wendy he wanted to portray on screen, which is one of the issues Stephen King himself had with the film.
Shelley Duvall as Wendy is really one of the most misogynistic characters ever put on film. She's basically just there to scream and be stupid, and that's not the woman that I wrote about.
But Kubrick, I guess, thought his portrayal was best for the film. And since a lot of Duvall's scenes were of her being scared and terrified, he wanted it to seem as real as possible. He wanted to see her fear. He wanted her to be truly terrified, and he was willing to do what he needed to do in order to get it, even if that meant driving Shelley Duvall slightly insane. And despite her true and genuine horror, he got the shot he wanted. He got the reaction he needed to make the scene perfect. Shelley Duvall praises Kubrick for putting her through this turmoil, though, saying that her performance wouldn't have turned out as amazing as it did without him pushing her to the brink of madness.
If it hadn't been for that, volley of ideas and sometimes butting of heads together, it wouldn't have come out as good as it did.
But was it all worth it? Because it almost broke her. After the film, she suffered a lot of mental issues. Some people say it's because of the treatment she faced on set, but I also read that she had existing psychological issues as well, so I'm not sure. There's a part in the book where it explains how every mother has a little bit of shine in them, this sort of mother's intuition that they can't really explain. I've always wished the film explored that more because it's one of my favorite parts about the book. Another thing, in the book, the Overlook Hotel burns down because the generator, the very thing Jack was supposed to be taking care of, exploded. And I think this ending would have connected well with the idea of spirits burning by fire as if being sent to hell for terrorizing his family. The story Grady told Jack about his daughter trying to blow up the place would have been a great foreshadowing moment if that were to be the ending. I also read something interesting about this film, and that was the idea about ghosts acting more as a metaphor for Jack's cabin fever instead of being actual spirits inhabiting the hotel. Every time Jack sees a spirit, he's standing in front of a mirror. He's looking at himself as if the evil beings spoken to him through the ghosts are actually coming from his own mind, and the ghosts are simply physical manifestations brought on by the deterioration of his sanity. Throughout the film, Jack doesn't take responsibility for his actions. He doesn't acknowledge that his drinking is what led to him getting fired from his previous role as a teacher. He doesn't tell Wendy that the old caretaker slaughtered his family in the very hotel he's moving them into. Even when presented with the guilt over hurting his son in the past, he downplays it, a simple accident, and even tries to blame Danny for it happening as if Danny deserved to be hurt because of his own actions. And maybe this is to represent the evil that lived inside of Jack all along. An evil that only manifested itself because in the Overlook there was nothing in its way. They were alone, trapped inside of an empty building with no witnesses and nothing to do. And so he gave in to his most evil desires because there was no one and nothing to stop him. Anyways, I hope you like my video. That's all I have to say about The Shining. What did you think about The Shining? Leave a comment down below. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on all my socials, X, TikTok, Instagram, at sushisreads, and I'll see you next time.